everyone! Next week is International Compost Awareness Week, and so I thought it would be a good time to post a follow-up video to check in on our home worm bin. So we've got a single bin system working right now. Notice that it has a lid on it with holes. Normally when it's stored in our garage, we keep the lid off to allow airflow into the bin. We've got a second tray on the bottom, and that doesn't have holes in it, and that's to collect any runoff or compost tea or excess moisture that's going to drain down to the bottom. So as you can see, we have some sheets of paper which have dried out a little bit on the top of our bin. We're going to moisten those before we put the worms away. So those are laying on top just to help with evaporation, to keep the bin climate controlled. We want it in that ideal range, not too hot, not too cold. Somewhere between 50 and 75 is about ideal. Okay, so I use dried leaves in my worm bin as their bedding and strips of paper. So we can see on top, let's see, that has to get mixed in. We're going to feed the worms today and just kind of see what we've got going on in here. So first off, we'll check into what we've got in our Denver compost bucket and see what can go to the worms instead. Alright, let's just dump that out and see what treasures we have in here. Okay, so we've got some tea bags. Now just like the newspaper, we don't want to use anything that does not have soy-based ink. Nothing that is plastic coated, so we'll just put those to the side. We got some tea bags, so these don't have staples in them, so those can definitely go into the bin. I like to not use too much fruit, so I know there's an apple core in here somewhere, but I tend to avoid putting banana peels in. That can attract mites, or too much fruit can attract fruit flies. So I'm a little on the conservative side, just because this bin is indoors. Now worms love to hide, they like to hang out in avocado pits, so we're definitely going to give them some of that. Got lots of coffee grounds in here, so they'll enjoy those. I've got onion, so the green onion probably wouldn't be too bad, but good rule of thumb is to not put onions, garlic, any spicy foods, no spicy peppers or anything like that in your worm bin. Got some paper towel here, some brown napkins, so those will be great. We'll moisten that and put that in with the bedding. Been drinking a lot of tea because we're all at home right now. Great. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I could put this sweet potato in here. It may sprout, but I would want to chop that up into some really small pieces before I put that into the worm bin. Okay. So I've got my food scraps here. We're going to move all of this bedding, or a lot of this bedding, over to the side. I like to feed my worm bin from left to right. So we're just going to dig in a little deeper here, get to where all the action is, and put our food scraps in there. Alright, so let's get a little close up here and we can see what our friends are doing. So you notice that all the materials are nice and shiny. We want to have quite a bit of moisture in our bin. A good consistency is to think of a wrung out sponge. So make sure there's no friends in here. So if I were to squeeze this, I'd get a little bit of water. You can see my glove just got really moist. So there's quite a bit of water in there, but it's not drowning the worms. There's no still water. So I've got worms of all different shapes and sizes here. There's two worms that are mating. That's a pretty cool find. So you can see they're bound to each other right there at the clitellum, which is the reproductive organ of the worm. So those two worms, they will produce little egg casings that will go around the clitellum, and then that is going to slough off, and then we will have a little egg sac. So when it hatches, we'll have quite a few worms, 4 to 5 worms will come out of that little egg sac, and then basically the system is self-regenerating. Great. So we'll give them some privacy. Okay, So just gonna have a quick look. I haven't been in my worm bin in a while. I wanna see how much they're eating, make sure that there's not a lot of excess food in here. The most common problem with a worm bin is that we overfeed them, so there's too much moisture, too much food, and that they're not able to get rid of it all, and that can lead to some of the pest problems that we see, odors and different issues. So okay, everybody looks pretty good. Because most of this is nice and moist and mushy, we're going to add some fresh bedding to cover them up and help insulate them. Now that it's getting warmer out, we want to make sure they've got lots of opportunities to burrow down into their bedding and not get overheated. If you notice that your worms are trying to escape or climb out of your bin, usually that's because there's an anaerobic environment, so there's not enough air circulation in there. It could be that they are overheating, so if too much food is in there, it's going to become more of an outdoor compost situation that will heat up. And then of course, if it's too warm in your garage or if your worm bin is in the direct sun, they're going to get overheated and want to climb out. Of course, if they're drowning and sitting in standing water, they're also going to try to escape. So think about worms that are in, soggy grass areas, and then when it rains a lot, we see them out on the sidewalk, and that's because they're trying to escape that anaerobic, flooded environment. So I'm just taking my dry leaves and getting them nice and moist. Normally what I would do is kind of leave this bedding, let it sit and soak and absorb all the water for a little bit, but just to finish off this video, I'm going to give that a little squeeze, nice wrung out sponge there, and we're just going to scatter that on top. Okay. Alright, we'll move this compostable items that are not going to be sent to the worms back into my brown paper bag here. All these coffee grounds and all that stuff is all good, so that can go on top. And then we're going to moisten this paper to give the worms a little bit more insulation. This is like their air conditioning. Okay. There we go. So the worms are looking good. They're healthy and happy. We're going to put them back into their safe little spot inside the garage. I hope you guys have a great week, and please post below if you have any questions.